It was 42 degrees that afternoon, and that wasn't a thermal sensation, it was real, like an oven with a broken fan. I was at home, melting into the sofa, sweating from parts of my body I didn't even know could sweat, when I decided to do the unthinkable, turn the air conditioning on full blast. And look, it wasn't just any air conditioning. It was one of those old, noisy models that sounds like it's about to take off at any moment. But it did what it promised. It cooled everything. A modern miracle fueled by noise and courage. I knew I wouldn't go unnoticed, because on this street, anything that defies common mediocrity becomes a target. And my neighbor, best known for her unhealthy obsession with the visual and auditory order of the community, was basically the FBI of suburban tranquility. A woman who thought that a sneezing dog was reason enough to open an investigation. She had only been president of the HOA for a few months. No one really voted. It just happened. The next thing we knew, she had already ordered the removal of the potted plants from the balcony of House 17 because too many flowers stimulates anxiety. I laughed at the time. I laughed out loud. And I think it was in that laughter that I planted the seed of war. So on that infernal day, with the air conditioning on full blast and the noise echoing like a small helicopter about to take off from the wall, she appeared. First came the crossed eyes from the window, then the whisper in the group of residents. Someone is contributing to the noise pollution. And finally, of course, the visit. She didn't knock. She stormed through the gate with a stiff gait, nose held high, carrying a clipboard, as if she were a UN inspector on a special mission. Dressed in that beige outfit that screams, authority without affection, she stopped in the middle of my driveway and spoke loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. What you're doing is a crime against the auditory peace of the condominium. I didn't even have time to reply. When I tried to open the door, she was already staring at my power box, that expression of someone who sees a legal loophole there, a possibility of control. And I, an idiot, thought she was just going to grumble and leave. I underestimated her. The next day, I left for work at 6 in the morning. Everything was normal. Air off, gate locked, dog fed. When I got back at 5 in the afternoon, I went straight into the house and tried to turn on the air. Nothing. It blinked, coughed, died. I thought it was a breakdown. I checked the circuit breaker. Everything was fine. I went down to the power box. Then the scene paralyzed me. The seals were different. The lock had been changed. And there was a sticker with the HOA logo, adjusted to community standards. Awaiting technical inspection. Technical inspection, my ass. She had literally hijacked my power box, turned off my system without permission, changed the access, and left a notice as if it were protocol. I was shaking with rage. It was as if someone had broken into my house, drunk my coffee, used my bathroom, and left a note saying they had reorganized it to improve the energy flow of the environment. I went to her house. I knocked. No answer. Just the sound of the internal fan, probably powered by my confiscated energy. I sent a message in the group. I was ignored. I called. It went to voicemail with a recording. I'm busy looking after the collective good. Leave a message. I spent the night in the heat, without air, without proper lighting, with the portable fan whining and my mood melting along with my patience. The dog seemed to be in a coma from the heat, and all I could think about was, she had messed with my energy. The next day, I called the electricity company. They confirmed that a request had been made on behalf of the HOA for emergency adjustment of an unauthorized residential system. No signature from me, no contact, nothing. The woman used the association's name as if she owned the street, and the company, in a bureaucratic scare, responded. That was the trigger. I spent the next few hours in revenge mode. It had to be something fitting, nothing violent, nothing outside the law, just fair and painfully memorable. That's when I remembered the electric fence in my backyard, an old installation made years ago, more decorative than functional, which was still connected to a separate system, something I'd always wanted to turn off completely, but never had a reason to. Now, I did. I reconfigured the wires. I repositioned the circuit. And I left an apparent connection error right there in my power box for her to see. It wasn't the kind of thing that exploded or really hurt, of course, but enough to give her quite a scare. A wake-up call, so to speak. Because if there was one thing this woman needed, it was exactly that. A good reality check. The next morning, the sun hadn't even risen, and I was already awake, with a cup of coffee in my hand and my gaze fixed on my power box, like a fish caught in a net, waiting for the shark to bite. The electric fence had been carefully reconfigured, respecting the voltages, of course. I'm not a criminal, I'm just creative. The current was light, but enough to leave a message engraved straight into the nervous system. She was predictable. Arrogance has an awakening time. And this woman had a habit of going for her morning walk at exactly 7:15, a walk she used as a social showcase. Hard steps, expensive sportswear, headphones she couldn't hear because she was always keeping an eye on those who needed correcting. She didn't walk for health, she walked to monitor. And there she was, punctual as a Swiss watch, only more poisonous. She turned the corner with the gait of someone who thinks she owns everything the sun touches. She stopped in front of my house. He looked at the corner of the garage with the same expression that policemen wear in TV series when they find clues. He did what I expected. He took a quick look sideways, pretended to stretch his lower back, approached the box and started rummaging around. The padlock I had replaced was the same as the previous one, so it looked like she still had access. And then, with the delicacy of a curious wild boar, she put her hand in. The snap was quick. A dry buzz, like a mosquito frying, followed by a high-pitched scream that, frankly, was funnier than any prank video on the internet. She jumped backwards in a way that would make any Olympic athlete envious. The water bottle flew, the cap fell off, and for a moment, I thought she was going to start twirling like Beyblade. There were no injuries. That wasn't even the intention, but the psychological impact was instantaneous. She looked at the box as if she had seen the demon in person. She put her hand to her chest, like someone trying to measure her heartbeat. And the look, that look was the best prize. A mixture of, "This can't be happening to me," and, "I think I saw my soul coming out of my ear." He staggered home. She didn't run, she didn't scream, she didn't ask for help. She couldn't. Pride wouldn't let her. If she fell there, defeated, she would lose everything she had built, or believed she had built. In the neighborhood group, nothing was said. No messages, no complaints. Absolute silence. But it was that strange silence, full of tension, like when you know the bomb has exploded, but no one wants to be the first to comment. 3 hours later, a truck from the electricity company turned up. 2 technicians came down, looked at the box, took photos, and talked to each other. I stood on the balcony with a lemonade, pretending to look after the plants. One of them came up to me. "Do you know if anyone has been messing around here?" I looked at him with the most innocent expression possible and replied, "I have no idea. All I know is that someone from the HOA has been messing around without my permission, and now everything is out of order." The technician nodded, wrote something down, and went back to his car. They had no proof of anything, especially since, technically, the woman had connected where she shouldn't have, and the scare she got was a direct result of her boundless curiosity and inflated ego. If she had left my energy alone, none of this would have happened. The next day, she showed up on my doorstep, for the first time in months, without a clipboard, without the posture of a field commander. He seemed smaller, less powerful. His hair stuck up a little crookedly, his eyes tired. He knocked on the door with 2 dry knocks. I opened it. "I just wanted to let you know that, after reviewing the HOA bylaws, I realized that we don't have the authority to intervene in personal electrical systems." I let out a slight smile, not a mocking one of satisfaction. Discreet, like someone listening to good music on the headset. "I'm glad you figured it out now. It took a while, but you got there." She didn't reply. She turned around and left. No argument. No new rule. For once, silence instead of orders. The power box has been left untouched ever since. No new warning, no new inspection. The air conditioning is still on when I want it, at the volume I want. And the electric fence? It's still there. No longer on as before, of course, but still there. A reminder, a warning. You don't always have to shout, sue, or argue. Sometimes, all it takes is a well-delivered shock to return someone to the place they should never have left. The shock wasn't just electric. It was moral, too. The woman walked down the street with shorter steps, downcast eyes, and a strange energy in the air. It wasn't guilt. It was contained anger, the kind that brews inside the ego, waiting for the next excuse to explode. And I knew it. She wasn't going to let it go. For a week, silence reigned. No letters, no visits. But silence in a condominium run by people with a mania for authority is never peace. It's a plan. It's a hidden meeting. It's a seed planted in the dark, waiting for its moment to blossom into a bureaucratic inferno. It was on Friday afternoon that the new attack came. A tall, thin man with a yellow dress shirt, a crooked tie, and a badge hanging out of his jeans pocket knocked on my door. He was from the Municipal Commission for Urbanism and Residential Planning, a fancy name for people who earn a public salary to measure the size of your sidewalk. He said he'd received a complaint about an irregular electrical installation that risked accidents. He pointed to a clipboard and spoke in a monotone voice. We need to check the perimeter and the external security system. Of course, the electric fence. I told him that there was nothing irregular, that all the cables were disconnected, and that the fence wasn't even in full working order. He wanted to see the documents. I showed them to him. The installation certificate, the technical report, all up to date. Still, he insisted. He said that the complaint referred to clandestine activation with harmful potential. And that's when I realized she hadn't come anymore, because she was using the most dangerous weapon of petty tyrants, bureaucracy. I let him come in, look, measure. Everything was legal, nothing hidden, no secret weapons, just the wiring, old, untouched since the last maintenance. He took notes, shook his head, and before leaving said, "The HOA is taking these reports very seriously. It seems there was a recent incident with a resident who suffered a scare. The scare almost escaped through the laughter I held back. I nodded seriously, and I replied, "Safety is a priority around here, especially with so many spontaneous inspectors loose in the neighborhood." He left, but he made it clear that he would be back, that there would be an extended inspection. The following Monday, I received notification. Now it was the HOA. The document, signed by her, claimed that my outdoor system posed a threat to the collective welfare, and that the mere presence of visible wiring was a serious aesthetic violation of community guidelines. The woman wanted me to remove the entire fence. It wasn't enough to be disconnected. It had to disappear from the map, as if the metal was hurting the landscape and traumatizing the butterflies. She was trying to erase the traces of her own shame, rewrite the narrative, play the heroine in a fight against the decay of harmonious coexistence. I decided it was time to stop playing games. I went to the registry office. I asked for the records of the fence's installation. I registered current photos. I drew up a new technical report. I updated the whole visual aspect. I painted, signposted, embedded the cables, and put up small decorative signs with phrases like "Safety and peace go hand in hand," and "Protection that respects the landscape." I made it look like a modern, sustainable, and, best of all, legal project. With all the documents in hand, I attached copies and filed them with the HOA. I didn't send a letter. I didn't debate in a group. I didn't give a stage. I just handed it over, along with a simple comment, reinforcing my full compliance with the community's rules based on Article 5 of the current bylaws. She received it and remained mute. The next day, the fence was featured in the neighborhood newsletter, an entire section with photos of my new installation called "A Reference in Community Safety." The City Council published a post praising residents who invest in modern solutions for residential protection without harming collective aesthetics. It hurt her, and I saw it. That afternoon, as she walked down the street, she stopped in front of my house. She looked at the fence. She didn't say anything. She didn't snort, but she held her cell phone so tightly in her hand that it felt like it was going to crush her. She wanted revenge, but what she got was public recognition that there was now a different kind of order. I didn't need a meeting, a shout, or a vote, just a shock and a bit of good taste with a built-in wire. The war became a chronicle. There were no more open battles, just subtle little blows dressed up as civility. HOA invitations with aggressive language, changes to the guidelines written with words as tame as they were poisonous, and long stares every time someone stopped to talk to me in front of the house. It was a Cold War at the pace of a suburban soap opera, only this time, control was slipping through her fingers. And then came the biggest mistake of all. She tried to manipulate the narrative. She published an article in the HOA's monthly newsletter entitled, "When Excess Masquerades as Innovation." It was a text full of indirection, talking about neighbors who create fortresses instead of homes, visual elements that create a climate of tension, and actions that look like security but serve to mark territory. Signed by her. Black and white photo. Official position. But the community was no longer on her side. The responses were immediate. Residents started sending in photos of their own homes with new railings, newly installed alarms and signs with phrases similar to mine. What she called excess became a trend. One of them even sent me a private message. "Thanks for the inspiration. I've already bought the black paint and had the same sign made as yours. We protect with style here, too." The woman was losing the neighborhood, and deep down, she knew it. That's when she decided to take one last breath of authority. A special meeting of the HOA, called urgently on a Tuesday evening, with an ambiguous agenda. Review of the aesthetic and functional structures of the condominium. She wanted to reverse everything, overturn my project, to create a new rule that would require the removal of any electrical structure with an aggressive appearance or that refers to institutional barriers. Only she forgot that if you're going to call for public war, you need to have support. That night, the community hall was packed. People who had never been to a meeting were there just to see the circus. Some were there to support me, others just for the entertainment. But everyone knew there was going to be a show. She climbed onto the small makeshift stage and began her speech. The same litany as always: coexistence, harmony, aesthetics, community. She said she cared about everyone's well-being, that she didn't want to live surrounded by fences, that this created invisible walls between neighbors who should share values. And then, without even finishing, someone raised their hand from the back. It was Mrs. Dorothy, who usually only left the house to look after the plants and feed a cat, that no one knew if it was really hers. "With all due respect," she said, with that calm that only old people with controlled anger have, "you talk a lot about coexistence, but to date, you're the only one who has fined half the street for the wrong flower." The silence was absolute. After that, there were more voices. One by one, residents who had never spoken out began to report abuse, nasty tickets, and senseless punishments. One guy said he had to paint his garage 3 times because his gray was too gray. A woman said she was warned because her 5-year-old daughter drew with chalk on the sidewalk. The atmosphere turned into a courtroom, and she, alone in the dock, with her face frozen in an artificial smile that gradually fell apart. When my turn came, I didn't have to say much. I stood up, thanked those present, and showed them, on a makeshift screen, the sequence of documents: authorization for the fence, a technical report, praise from the city council, prints of the neighborhood newsletter praising the project, and, to close, the email from the city's legal department saying that there had been no violation on my part, and that, on the contrary, my conduct had stood out as an example of how to apply modern security without violating regulations. She tried to argue. She said that the whole thing was technically acceptable, but emotionally damaging. Nobody understood. Neither did she. The speech dismantled itself. A woman with such an attachment to control didn't know what to do when control turned against her. At the end of the meeting, there was a vote. Her proposal to overturn projects like mine was rejected by 86% of the votes. Of those, 70% also suggested that the HOA require technical reports before any warning is issued, which basically took away all the power she used to give the neighborhood hell. The next morning, I received an envelope, no sender. Inside, a handwritten letter in a hasty handwriting, "Congratulations on winning with grace." That hurts more than the shock. Unsigned. But everyone knew. She went out less. She still walked, but at alternative times. Her posture was no longer upright. Her clipboard was retired. Some say she's thinking of moving. Others think she'll try to return to leadership. But one thing's for sure, she never touched my power box again. The air conditioning is still noisy. The security system is impeccable. And the electric fence? Off, but always in sight. As a reminder, not every fence is meant to keep you out. Some are just to show how far it's worth going. And if you like this video, don't forget to leave a comment and a like.